Okay, hello and welcome to today's webinar, Adapting Marketing for a Recession. My name is Ricky Bijlani. I am the Senior Director of Marketing here at AUDIENCEX. I just wanted to thank you all for taking a bit of your time out of your day today to join us. I am going to give this just a couple more minutes to let people finish joining us. And while I do, I will go over a couple of quick notes before we get started. First, we will indeed be sending a recording of this webinar to all registrants afterwards, so everyone can look out for that soon. Additionally, we will be taking some time to answer any questions that you may have at the end of today's presentation. So if you do have any, you can go ahead and submit them at any time via the Zoom's Q&A feature right at the bottom of the interface. We will have some poll questions during our conversation. I will be your host moderating our webinar. So today, we'll look at challenges businesses face for the possibility of recession and discuss how marketers can best navigate times of economic uncertainty to maintain performance and market share. So with that, today's agenda is broken out into three themes: the economic climate, our current landscapes, insights and recommendation, and then we'll follow up that with our audience Q&A. Here to guide us through a bit of that today, I am pleased to introduce our channel experts from AUDIENCEX, Stephen Kaufman, who is our VP of Client Services, Steve Mantia, who is Director of Search and Social, and Phil Rizkala, who is the Programmatic Media Manager. Stephen, Keith, and Phil, thank you very much for being here today and joining us in this discussion. I know this is going to be great. Before diving into our conversation, if you can briefly introduce yourself, including your role and background. We'll go ahead and start off with you, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. So, hi, everybody. I'm Stephen Kaufman. I lead our client services team here at AUDIENCEX. My team and I are responsible for everything client related, so being the client's advocate, working with Keith, working with Phil and others at the company to make sure that our campaigns deliver. My background is both large and small agency. I've been with some of the large holding companies and have had the experience of working through a number of economic downturns. So looking forward to sharing some insights during today's conversation.
Experience. I'll jump in next. My name is Keith Manti. I'm the Director of Search and Social, both paid and organic at AUDIENCEX. I've got a lot of agency experience as well. I've worked with a number of large and medium-sized brands, both in entertainment, CPG, for Paramount Pictures, Disney, and some CPG brands like Staples, LOL Surprise, and Little Tex as well. So happy to jump in and talk about kind of everything search and social as it relates to this present economic situation.
Thanks, Keith. Hi, everybody. My name is Phil Rizkala. I am a programmatic media manager here at AUDIENCEX. I have been in the industry, both in programmatic and just in media buying in different capacities and or analytics or media planning to some degree for the last or greater 5-7 years. It's my pleasure today to be speaking on this subject. I'm pretty passionate about programmatic and there's a lot to covet from this conversation. So excited to be here with you all today.
Great, thanks, Phil. With that, we'll go ahead and get started on our first section, which is the economic climate. So regardless of what we call our current economic situation, whether or not it's officially being labeled as a recession, we all know what conditions and challenges are that we're dealing with right now. And of course, every economic contraction is different. So the first question is, how does our economic downturn differ from previous recessions? Stephen, you want to jump in there?
Sure. So again, I've been through a couple of these, and I think, Ricky, as you said, each one is a little bit different. So I was working back in 2001. My memory of that one is it was very quick, right? There was a dot-com burst. A lot of the companies that had fueled growth leading up to 2000 were exposed as not really driving a lot of revenue. 9/11 happened, and things went south. I remember that one turning around pretty quickly though, and not a huge impact. 2008, really caused by the financial sector and bad loans and what was going on in banking. I remember during that one there was a decent amount of doom and gloom leading up to the official designation of a recession. And then it seemed like when the recession word was used, we were already in recovery, which I think is kind of native to a recession. So it seemed like we recovered pretty quickly after a whole bunch of negativity. 2020 was really COVID based, so I believe that there was a month or two of recession there, where the economy contracted for consecutive months, quarters, whatever, the definition seems to change. So I think that there are specific reasons for each one of those. How those impact brands, really differs. I remember in 2008 thinking, well, all right, the free money that everybody was getting access to from banks writing bad loans certainly has an impact, but how is that really impacting people's ability to go to the store and buy things, right? And it almost felt like the press blaming everybody on everything and creating this environment of doom and gloom sort of fueled the fire. Whereas I remember thinking, well, if you still have your job, you still need to eat, you still need to put gas in the car, right? You still need to do all those things. So if you just go about your normal buying patterns, right, the economy would be fine. But because everybody was hammering home that the banks were failing and it was going to be horrible, right? I think that led to a lot of it. Whereas, I didn't feel like things were quite that negative. This one we're looking at now, right? There are supply chain challenges. There's the lingering impact of COVID. There's the war in Ukraine. So there are very specific things that we can point to that are causing some pain in the marketplace. But again, overall, things are not that bad. And I think we've seen that throughout the downturns I've been involved with.
Great, thank you, Stephen. So before we get started, next question, I do want to launch our first poll of the day. And so you should be seeing the poll question one shortly. Here, I'm just going to quickly read through it. Have you managed marketing through a prior economic downturn or recession? So you can go ahead and put your answers in there. What we will do is we'll look at all the poll questions at the end of the webinar during our Q&A section, and then we'll go ahead and share the results and have a conversation around those. Okay, next, so why is it so important to continue marketing and or maintain budgets during an economic downturn or recession?
I can jump in on this. Like immediately from a search and social perspective, my brain first goes to optimization signal. You want to make sure that you have as much information as you can if you're trying to optimize towards an event or a conversion or something like that. So as a reminder, a lot of the platforms that we execute on, like Facebook specifically, you really need like 30 to 50 conversion actions per week for it to exit that learning phase so you won't get stuck. Google has very similar limitations. You need about 30 conversions every 2 weeks. So, for companies that are large enough and are already in that wheelhouse where things are running and functioning properly, you want to make sure that you're not cutting media so that you're entirely losing any momentum that you've gained at that point.
Yeah, just to continue off of what Keith is saying, depending on your vertical and category, it might make more sense to spend a little bit more, and in other cases maybe to cut out spend or kind of cut back on spending, but it really does kind of depend on where you land in certain categories. But one thing to mention is with less competition in the marketplace, brands are in a pretty unique position to increase their market share and extend their reach perhaps at what I would call discounted rates.
Yeah, I would add to that there's an expression that the rich stay rich. Right. So during some of these times, there are people whose spending power is not impacted. And if you decrease marketing spend, if you do things differently, obviously it varies brand by brand. But you run the risk of not being front and center and top of mind with those people who are less impacted, who do have the same spending power and who are out in the marketplace looking to shop.
Great, thank you.
Always got to keep your brand top of mind.
Definitely. Thank you, Keith. Yeah, thanks everyone. So next question for the group here is, how does focusing on performance marketing help brands maintain growth through an economic downturn? Phil, do you want to take this lead with us?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you. So simply stated, I think just being present. Performance-based marketing, if we can kind of just define that quickly, I will just steal something that I liked, that I found off the internet. Digital strategies that, where online marketing is paid for based on performance of ads and how those desired conversions kind of take place. These can take the shape and form of sales, leads, or clicks. So as a brand or an agency or business owner, engaging with your customers always comes at a cost. And as a brand, you have options as to how you can kind of engage with your audience. I personally group them into two major buckets. One has the opportunity to really deploy media organically or really just pay to get that attention through paid media channels. Engaging with your most valuable audiences is an excellent way to be prepared with a refined strategy when conditions economically or maybe within your category allow for spending to be ramped up.
Great,
And
thanks.
I would just add that performance marketing is measurable by its very nature. So during these times, dollars tend to get scrutinized. And when you can prove some kind of a value to the dollars that you're spending, whether it's through a brand study, top of funnel awareness kind of metrics, or click rates, site traffic, all the way through sales, right? Being able to justify the spend through performance media is a great way to shift those dollars. And say in 2020, we saw something interesting where when the world first went into lockdown, a lot of advertisers pulled budgets, right? There's no point in advertising if nobody can leave their homes, right, and spend money. So I had clients who continued to spend, saw amazing efficiencies in the marketplace. And then what happened towards the end of that year is everybody else jumped back in and actually jumped into performance marketing, performance media when they weren't doing it before. And some of those efficiencies obviously went away. We were in a good place because a lot of what we do is algorithm based, right? It's machine learning. So the machine had that learning period over a course of months in order to get smart. So we just had an inherent advantage over anybody who stopped advertising and then jumped back in to try and get on the performance marketing bandwagon because our campaigns were consistent throughout.
Only thing I would add to that statement, Stephen, is just that if you're not spending during that time, you're not going to be able to kind of covet some of the benefits of engaging with your audience during that time as well.
Thank you. Next, does the way we think about audiences and targeting change when we're considering them through an economic lens?
I can jump in on that one. I mean, from a search and social, or really primarily a social perspective, I think when we're talking about being in an economic state like we are, you really have to have an increased focus and importance on audience qualification. So when we know some people don't have as much discretionary income to spend, you have to consider that in your media. You can't necessarily just go against broad audiences and expect performance. You have to consider what other targeting layers you may want to add on to that by, some examples, I guess, would be targeting users with higher income or users that have, a history of doing online shopping. And even some peripheral audience segments or targeting strategies, like looking at peripheral targeting segments, like people who frequently travel, most likely because they have a little bit of discretionary income to be able to get from point A to point B that not everybody has. So I think looking at those signals will kind of help you lean into people that, may be a little bit more flexible and able to purchase whatever you're trying to sell.
This is a really strong point, Keith. And just to piggyback off some of the things that you've said, we don't like wasting money. Speaking from the programmatic perspective and just open internet media buying, digital strategies depend on the support of data for us. And a lot of our job is to find efficiency and do our best to multiply that. So we recognize the value of using technology that enables audience discovery and segmentation. So AUDIENCEX has recently partnered with Distillery, a leading custom audience solutions company. Partnerships like this really enable us as marketers to maximize customer data and to reach highly customized targeted audiences while maintaining an operational efficiency or multiplying an efficiency for our clients or our brands that we're working with. So there's a lot of benefit to kind of having this scrutiny if you are using that to kind of supplement a different perspective.
Great, thank you. As every period of economic uncertainty is unique, what are some concerns that should be considered alongside the typical decrease in consumer spending?
From a social perspective, just to jump in on that one again, I think there are a couple things to consider. I think a big one is really customer perception and overall sentiment. Consumers are increasingly aware of what's going on with news headlines and just economic downturns and what's affecting really everybody from a number of different factors and angles. So I think you have to consider what your approach is, what message you're using, and also what other brands or in some cases like influencers you're aligning yourself with. Especially on social, where on the majority of platforms, users can comment and respond, react, tag other people. So if you're not kind of aware of what the general tone of the marketing environment is, you can get into some hot water sometimes.
Yeah, this reminds me of a couple of different accounts that I've had through different periods of times that were very unique to all of us, not just as marketers, but as humans. In 2020, I was on an airline travel-based account, and it did not make sense to continue spending money when the world was shut down, just like Stephen was mentioning earlier. And there's a value to still having some sort of presence and continuing to have the awareness of your product in the marketplace, but we're not going to be spending at the same level when the world is literally shut down. So there was another, kind of to contextualize this more so, with a decrease in consumer spending, as well as kind of just thinking about the conditions of things. I was on another account where we had supply chain issues, and we were still advertising some of the products that were unable to be fulfilled or had trouble with fulfillment. And that kind of came from clients themselves, but this whole thing was kind of discovered through the process. And it became a quick approach to kind of redirect messaging, or perhaps change the tone of which we were speaking on certain things, and really just like not advertising a product that kind of be fulfilled at all, altogether. But there have been a couple of occurrences that during this time we've seen both brands and agencies respond appropriately and sometimes not as appropriately, just given how things are changing all the time.
Yeah, I think to build on what Keith and Phil said, as we said, everyone is unique, and I think you have to adapt the message as well as the medium into what you're doing, right? So if you're a travel company in 2020 when the world is locked down, right, nobody's going to be booking a flight, but they are going to be booking a flight eventually, right? So you want to make sure you're in that consideration set. So maybe don't spend quite as much. Your dollars aren't spent around trying to drive an immediate booking, but more of a brand awareness message that we're here when you need us, right? The other thing that's very specific about this economic downturn is the supply chain challenges, right, that Phil mentioned. And those are very real. And that's something that, I haven't really experienced that much before. In my career, we were working with a bottled drink manufacturer who couldn't get enough glass bottles for their product, right? So they had a direct-to-consumer business as well as a retail business. It didn't make sense for them to continue to spend on the direct-to-consumer because they still needed to fulfill the retail orders because that was their bread and butter. So instead of going dark, though, they shifted their advertising to be less about the DTC business and more about the drive-to-retail business, right? We work with a large B2B advertiser who's focused in parts, electronic manufacturing parts, and there were supply chain challenges there. So they don't have as much in stock on their site now. So their business has pivoted to focus more on the sourcing aspect of it. So instead of coming to their site and buying those specific products, come to their site, fill out a request for quote, and their sourcing team will go out and find those parts for you, right? So it's about being nimble, being able to turn the business a little bit to leverage what's happening in the marketplace and not just going with what you've done in the past.
Yeah, that one's a big one.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to switch gears here. So we're going to go to our next section theme on our current landscape. And with that, before we get started, we have our second poll question that you should be seeing on your screen very shortly here. Have you seen an impact in your marketing budgets or performance related to the current economic situation? So if you can take some time and answer the questions here. Once again, we'll go ahead and review the percentages and have a discussion in our Q&A. So with that, if budgets are decreased or reallocated, what are some ways we can maximize performance with less spend?
So again, sorry to just keep jumping in on this, guys, but so for social, like what you can do really is just having a selective approach to your tactics or your overall strategy. So reduce waste from some of the junk inventory placements, or if you know what you're trying to advertise really requires getting a very clear message through, or a really stellar creative that you might have, leaning into those tiny little side rail ad placements really aren't going to be the best option for you. So I think being strategic and selective about where you're advertising, when you're advertising is really going to help maximize your budget from that perspective.
Strong point, Keith. Another thing from a programmatic side is I would say that a strong audience segmentation strategy goes a long way. Engaging with like users that are in the disposition of your conversion funnel, that is, and engaging with these users that are closer to the bottom of your conversion funnel is just the best place to be spending your money. So let's spend where it makes sense. The prerequisite that one would have to kind of go through is identifying the steps towards the conversion.
And one thing to actually just kind of jump off of that just for a second is like the whole part about audience segmentation makes a lot of sense. And for anybody that's worked with a platform rep, especially like a Facebook rep or something like that, really the last 2 years they've been pushing just go broad audiences, broad demographic targeting. And it's important to know that while platform reps are going to recommend that in most cases, it really is not a one size fits all. So Phil, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, especially when your budget is you have to consider all these different factors in market. So going broad isn't necessarily going to work. And that's really when you should be including some of those layers that we talked about, whether it be income layers or affinity layers or whatnot, to make sure you're not wasting budget on people that may just not be eligible for what you're trying to sell.
Yeah, and I think with it potentially increased budgets, it's focusing on the tried and true, right? So what's worked, making sure that you're heavying up in those areas. We always want to include some part of the budget for test and learn so that we can explore new things, but maybe this isn't the time to do that. If we're putting 10% of the budget aside for that, maybe we put away 5% of the budget instead, or we just have to lose that test and learn ability, for the short term. But it's circling the wagons a little bit, focusing on the tried and true, the best audiences, best channels, best tactics to prove the ROI. Because again, as long as there's measurable results that you can report back, it's hard to justify cutting spend.
Great, thank you. So how does programmatic technology help marketers get more out of their budget? Phil?
I'm just going to echo really something that Stephen was just touching on, is that, programmatic is this buying approach that helps marketers improve performance through data-driven decisions. This is all about delivering a more relevant ad experience to the right audiences. The technology that we have access to, that we lean into, enable marketers to have more leverage in a lot of ways. We get a lot of control about where or how often ads show up and who they kind of show up to. So using like data points based on location, past location behavior, contextual relevance, or going down the path of like lookalike modeling. If we have access to first-party data, there are a number of strategies that we can deploy to just make the best use of the money being put out there. A couple of ways that we do this, again, is strongly sometimes through artificial intelligence, but we do a lot of human reporting as well. But we're consistently guided by the ability to work towards measurable KPIs and goals. These are always digitally tracked or measurable goals that we can kind of set in system and also work towards as collectively as possible. By taking advantage of first-party data and focusing on audiences that convert, we're able to not only covet insights about customers, but take on really high-level, vertical, or publisher-agnostic perspective of what's working for us. This could further enable partnerships or better conversations to kind of grow from there. At AX, we've grown our tech stack through valuable partnerships. We're working with a number of different types and data providers in the space, but namely, I'll say Factual, Distillery, Peer 39. We're working some supply partnerships through Magnite. We have a great relationship that's helping us find cost savings that we can pass down to clients. we're using the best platforms to buy media available today. And utilizing these platforms gives us the ability for real-time optimization, in-flight optimizations, and really allows us to make strides towards any campaign KPIs.
I know this is mostly programmatic related, but just being in the search and social world, I know one thing that you guys do have in programmatic is the ability to drive up frequency and follow users in multiple places. So like from a search and social perspective, we're very limited. Each of those platforms are walled gardens. So if you're hitting someone on Facebook, it's very challenging to actively hit them on another platform, but that's something that you can do very easily on programmatic. Increase or decrease frequency, you have a lot more visibility across that like exposure that we wouldn't have on social.
It's a great point to just bring up as well. Thank you for saying that, Keith. You know, when we're talking about programmatic, we're also talking about buying across the open internet. So we're staying outside of all of the walled gardens that might be likened to the search and the social and the spaces that are controlled by those respective platforms. So reaching your customers does become very important. It's also important when it comes to brand awareness.
Great, thank you. So this is more focused on social media. How can social media be used most effectively in this kind of economic climate?
So the couple things that I would say for social, how to really lean in is to use social as a social tool. Like one of the advantages is people are going to these platforms not just to be advertised to or to look for stuff, but to really get caught up on what's happening in their friends and family's lives. So there's a native feel to it. So if you can lean into that using very native creative, I think that's a very easy way to approach. The other thing is leaning into referral-based messaging. So I see a lot of advertisers doing this effectively is when you have a promotion, or I mean, even if you don't, encouraging users, telling them what to do. So if it's a brand that's selling a product, having someone tag a friend that might like a product, or if you're having a promotion, tag someone else for you both to get some kind of discount or entry point into the business. People are on social to connect with friends, so it only makes sense to lean into that aspect as much as you can, because then you get earned media, and as long as people are liking your product and there's no issues from that perspective, it's free media, free exposure, and you'll probably get people bantering back and forth depending on what the business is.
Yeah, and I would add to that, we've talked a lot about using technology, and refining audiences. The social platforms are really good at that, right? So, for better or for worse, Facebook collects a whole lot of data about everything that you do, everything you consume, everything you like, what your friends are consuming and they're liking, right? And making all those connections. And just about all of it is targetable in some way, shape, or form, right? So that exhaust trail that you leave behind you when you do anything in any programmatic media, but especially in social, all of that data is captured and it can be refined and used for targeting to maximize the impact of the budget and lean into the technology and the algorithms that are going to help to optimize things.
I mean, that's actually probably the biggest point of all of it, Stephen, is you're 100% right, is the algorithm. So understanding where to lean in to take advantage of that. An easy way to do it is using some of the tools that you have on those platforms, like user polls. Those drive the strongest engagement on social platforms, and algorithms are triggered by engagement and by strong responses. So if you can lean into those tools and get people engaging with polls, or in some cases, platforms will come out with new functionality, like when Facebook Live was first came out, or when Instagram Stories first became a thing. It didn't matter how many people were using them; they were always front and center. And especially for advertisers, when you're leaning into those tools and tricks, you're going to drive up engagement. And also, the platform algorithms may favor your media over others because they want to focus that feature or that new tool that's available. So, yeah, really, that's probably the most important part.
Great. Next question is, how important is it to tailor messaging to a brand's audience at this time?
I'd like to start in my response to this. I think it's a really simple answer for me. Tailoring a message to a brand's audience, if you have it and if it's within your ability or capabilities, do it. This can provide an in-flight benefit in a lot of cases, especially in our space. We can always tailor an audience to creative messaging, and in some cases, we'll activate what is recognized as DCO tech. DCO also stands for Dynamic Creative Optimization. This is a technology that rapidly builds multiple versions or iterations of an ad, and using like the same base creative while tailoring parts of the ad based on the audience, context, or past performance. This can help ads resonate with consumers. The more you learn about your audience in our space, the better you can engage with them.
Yeah, I would add the really critical to be specific in your messaging. If you think about what's happened recently, right? Again, going back to 2020, you don't want to be tone deaf, but at the same time, you need to tailor things. So if you think about what the automotive manufacturers did, the local dealers, right, they started advertising contactless test drives. Right, nobody wanted to go into a dealership, get in a car that other people had been in. So, right, they offered you the ability. They were going to come to your home. You never had to go into the showroom. They were going to wipe down the car before they left. You take it, you drive it, right, park it in your driveway. You call them up, they come and get it. Right, so they pivoted around that. Right, restaurants went with contactless delivery, contactless pickup, right, seating outdoors, all things like that. So, I think from a messaging standpoint, it's really, really critical to pivot and show that your brand is there. I remember also during that time seeing commercials and TV shows where people were gathering in places when we couldn't. Right, it was also kind of strange, and you'd see people showing up at other people's apartments on TV and greeting and hugging, and nobody was wearing a mask, and it was like, oh my God, what's going on? So you've got to walk that line of understanding what's relevant in the marketplace, but meeting the consumer's needs.
As we face continued supply chain issues, how can marketing address potentially delayed fulfillment? Keith?
I'd say for social, it's really just making sure you're using those communication channels to your advantage. So if you're having issues with supply chain or slower deliveries, you need to communicate that with your potential audiences ahead of them purchasing or immediately when they purchase. So you can at least control the message and the narrative, because I'm sure we've all experienced this, especially in the last year or two, where you order something that would normally come in 2 days, if not less, from Amazon or another provider, and then all of a sudden it takes a week, if not more. And at that point, especially when we're in a situation where there's a economic downturn or there may not be as much discretionary income to spend, the money you do spend, your expectations are that much higher. So being just level setting with customers and audiences and letting them know, I really do think goes a long way in preventing backlash and preventing, the volume of returns or, payback requests and things like that.
Yeah, for better or for worse, we are living in a world of immediate gratification. Right. So, when you order something on Amazon, it's going to take 3 days to arrive instead of 1. Right, you're like, oh my God, what's going on? Right. So there's that expectation out in the marketplace. I think, as Keith mentioned, social media is a great way to engage with your audience and your fans and your likes, to keep them updated about what's going on in the marketplace. Right. If you don't have product, you don't want them going to the competitor. Right. You've spent a lot of time and effort building up some kind of a brand loyal customer, and all of a sudden you're going to lose them because you don't have product. So it can be more about data capture, building nurture streams, email follow-up, social media communications to let people know what's going on. If you have to, buy one, get one on the next purchase. We can't fulfill this one. We'll give you 2 for 1 next time, a coupon for your next purchase, right? Doing things to keep them engaged so that you don't just lose that customer.
Right. What are some of the things you feel have definitely shifted?
Yeah, I mean, I would say supply chain issues are real, right? We've seen it across a couple of clients. So, we just talked about that a little bit, but, if you don't have product, you can't get product, you can't get product in scale. That's definitely a real thing that's going on these days. There's the price of gas right now. What ends up happening though in a lot of these instances is perceptions adjust, right? So if you think back a little bit, right, $4 a gallon was unheard of, right? It can never be $4 a gallon. We'll never pay $4 a gallon. And then it hit $4 a gallon and we pay $4 a gallon. Right now we're saying the same thing about $5, $6, $7 a gallon, right? So, unfortunately what tends to happen is prices shoot up and then they come down, but they don't come down to where they were before. Right. There is still that, if people are willing to pay this, right, even though we could bring it that far down, right? We're not actually going to do that, right? Think about, airlines charging baggage fees, right? The initial reason that they gave for that was because of an increase in fuel costs, right? And they weren't going to increase the cost of tickets, so it cost more to fly, right? They used more fuel when the plane was heavier, so they were going to discourage you from bringing on all your bags, so they're going to start charging baggage fees. Well, how long ago was that, right? And those baggage fees have still stayed, right? So, things have definitely shifted, but we shift with it. And, as an overall society, we're pretty adaptable and we pivot. So, there are things that are real out there, but, things will be okay.
Yeah, thanks,
Just,
Steve.
I'd say to kind of add to that a little bit, in addition to the economic situation that we're in at this moment, there's also been over the last year or two an increased really importance and focus on consumer privacy, and the combination of users having potentially less discretionary income to spend, and at the same time advertisers having really less signal and ability to find the right audiences. The combination, I think, has left a lot of people frustrated in how can we effectively reach our potential customers without enormous marketing budgets, if you will. And I think one thing that you mentioned earlier, Stephen, is just making sure within this market or within this economic situation that we're in, continuously testing and learning so that you understand what's working and what's not, will kind of help combat some of those challenges that we're currently facing.
Great, thanks, Keith. Why would you say social advertising is important to meet business growth goals?
Why it's important to meet business growth goals? I think it represents an opportunity to not only to sell, but to reach and engage with customers on a more personal level. And this is, I guess, more specifically to social, but it really does represent like a bilateral mode of communication where users aren't just coming to a website to purchase, they're going to social channels to leave feedback, to respond, or if they're having problems with the product, to get support. So I think social is important because it allows that deeper connection and is more than just a one-stop shop. You can kind of get a lot of things from social.
Yeah, I would almost rephrase that question too, instead of growth goals, just business goals, right?
Yeah.
Because in times like this, right, flat is the new growth. So, and as far as social goes, right, social works, right? It's extremely measurable. It's extremely flexible. The ability to launch a brand study, if you need to prove brand metrics within some of those platforms, is literally just a couple of clicks, right? You don't need to go off and engage with a third party and build those studies, right? It's extremely easy. So depending on what the business goals are, being able to prove the value is extremely effective in social media.
Great, thanks, Aaron. So we're going to shift again to our last topic, which is insights and recommendation. With that, again, we're going to launch our last poll question for today. So you should see that popping up on your screen shortly. So here, are you planning to make any adjustments to your budget? So if you can please take a quick minute to look through the answers and select the best choice. And we'll go ahead and go through that shortly. So while the audience is filling out the poll, I'll go ahead and get started here. So what does your crystal ball tell you about our current economic downturn and possible recession?
Yeah, I feel like Kevin Bacon in Animal House, right? When the mob is coming at him and he's going, "Everybody remain calm, all is well," right? Like I said, we're going to get through this, right? We know why things are the way they are, right? The Fed made some adjustments during COVID that are now getting undone. There's definitely supply chain issues. The cost of gas is expensive. There's a war in Ukraine, right? Those are all specific things that we can point to that we're going to get past, right? Things will adjust. So my crystal ball tells me, as a marketer, stay the course, keep spending. Again, I think flat is the new growth. So, you be really realistic about goals and what's possible in the marketplace. But, the brands, it's been proven throughout these downturns, the brands that continue to invest in their brand and stay front and center are the ones that recover quickest when it's time to recover.
Great, thanks, Stephen. What kind of strategies can be can be employed to make better use of a budget?
I've got lots for search and social. I mean, first and foremost, I'd say just be intelligent or strategic about, where and how you're advertising. So that could be being selective of what platforms you're executing on, and within those platforms, what ad placements or creative types you're using. We'll just make sure your budget's going as far as you can. I think some other creative ways is leveraging UGC or user-generated content for creatives, particularly in social. That really gives it stopping power. For the majority of platforms, you're scrolling through feeds like we were talking about earlier to really get caught up on what your friends, family, or maybe celebrities that you follow are doing. But when you get to these really polished creatives, a lot of people will find that you just swipe by them because it's an ad. But if you can use some of those UGC style creatives, you have more stopping power. You have to invest less money in creative production, and actually Mint Mobile is a really great example of how they're doing this. Ryan Reynolds owns Mint Mobile, and they recycle commercials, or he does his own commercials, and we'll flip them upside down from a commercial they used the prior month, and communicates in the commercial, we're saving money by reusing creatives or using stock photos and passing those savings on to clients, or you could pass those savings on to media investment if you need to. I think that's another great way. Yeah, I think that kind of wraps up for social.
I would like to jump in on this question. The strategy, again, to just kind of restate the question, what kind of strategies can be employed to make better use of the budget? In programmatic, it's really important to recognize the path to conversion. So depending on your category, this could come in different shape and forms. If you're in e-commerce, then perhaps, there's a cart and cart abandoners, places that we can look where we see, that there's activity that is close to the conversion. So recognizing these dispositions and identifying them is really where it all starts. So I'll kind of broadly state that, but beyond that, starting to segment the audience from there becomes a great way to make better use of a budget.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is understand the KPIs and make sure everybody's aligned on them, right? So there's going to be so much more scrutiny on the dollars that are being spent. On the marketer side, make sure everybody allocating those dollars understands what the KPIs are and what the return expected on that is. Make sure that's communicated effectively to everybody who's executing the buy, and make sure you've got the steps and the processes in place to report back to make sure that you're able to deliver on those KPIs.
Great, thank you. Just diving a little bit deeper into that, what tactics are recommended to maximize conversions?
Yeah, from a programmatic perspective, I would say that this depends. But one of the most underutilized tools by both brands and CMOs or owners, perhaps, is the first party data. So it's free and it's valuable. So that's a very, very advantageous data point for remarketing, lookalike modeling for prospects. But really, this is something that should be capitalized upon. A couple of other things to mention is really just through third-party prospecting based on those relevant data points that drive conversions. So we can use that for both contextual context as well as just trying to associate and lean in on what works. But really, we have to work back from success. That's where we try and look at different categories, verticals, supply. I mean, there's a number of different ways that we can kind of refine where we want to cut the fat, but there are a lot of opportunities where we can trim in our space. But a couple of other things to just really name off is looking at areas that are valuable. This comes in different shapes and forms depending on where you are and what your vertical category is. But I mentioned earlier cart abandoners. This is an excellent space to be spending some of your money, and if you're not there, you should be. CRM data, another very valuable asset. Making use of first-party data in a different format sometimes just takes shape and form of internal email lists, perhaps, that can be utilized to be found on the open internet. Interest-based and or behavioral tactics can be very relevant depending on the category. I worked in both CPG and automotive in different tiers, and this is a very relevant data point that we use as far as a strategy output and how we can maximize conversions and sometimes even just report on conversions. So really, to summarize all that, it just depends.
We use data as one of the focal points of maximizing conversions for social as well, especially if you have a lot of first-party data or customer data of your own. we use that in social to model audiences and scale it up and try and find people not that are just, maybe meet a qualification of what your customers look like, but finding audiences that actually are exactly like your specific customers. So that, that's a hugely important way to lean in. And from a technical perspective, as we're saying, like the better data you have, the better information or action you'll be able to take. So on platforms like Facebook, where there are challenges in attribution and tracking conversions, lean into the tools that are available, like Conversions API. It's only going to increase and improve the quality of the data that you've got coming in that you can action and decision off of later.
Great, thanks everyone. The next question is, can ad tech be used to ensure that budgets are used effectively and accounted for?
Yeah,
I just mentioned that. It's really just Conversions API on Facebook from a social perspective.
Yeah, short answer is yes. That's what AdTech was built to do.
Good.
Definitely. Yeah. And we don't really need to talk about this too much, but definitely we use both humans and AI to deterministically place budgets across different channels, device types, site lists. So we're definitely using technology to ensure budgets are used and accounted for.
Great. We can jump over to next question. So could it be wise to actually invest more in marketing right now?
I definitely think it can be wise at the right time. And again, it depends on what your situation is, what your customer flow is, cash flow and whatnot. But what I generally will tell clients is find like a zeitgeist or strike while the iron's hot. So if you're seeing a product or category, or even if it's something as specific as a single post that's taking off, lean into that. Those are the places that you want to invest because the algorithms will pick it up. It will give you the biggest opportunity to reach users on the platform and get earned media. And if there's, I think I mentioned this before, but if there's also new functionality on a platform that may be very early, there's not a lot of advertisers or users even leaning into it, that's a huge opportunity to really kind of dive in head first and take advantage of the algorithms that are probably prioritizing that type of media.
Yeah, in 2020, I was working with a publisher, a lot of shelter books, shelter titles in their portfolio. We probably spend 3-4x what we would normally spend over a 4 to 6 month period because people were home, they couldn't go anywhere, they wanted things to consume, they were subscribing to magazines left and right. We couldn't believe it. Every week we were upping budgets week over week over week. Again, literally getting to 3 to 4x where, we had got through the annual budget in probably 3 or 4 months, but the return was there. So we were able to get more money and we were able to keep spending. Spirits brands, saw great growth in 2020 as well. So there's absolutely categories that will be poised to increase growth and increase market share during this time.
And just from my perspective, if your brand is in position to invest more in marketing, you absolutely should. It could be a very advantageous maneuver for a number of reasons, both through discovering what works for you and also just being prepared to strike when the opportunity comes. You might miss out while your competitors are kind of sliding in and taking the win. So growth doesn't happen overnight, and marketing is the insights that we can covet are available in tomorrow's reporting.
Great. We have one more question before we head over to our Q&A section. We have about 11 minutes left here. So are there specific channels that are more effective for performance marketing?
Search.
Yep. Right. There's nothing more qualified than somebody actively looking for something. Yep.
Hand raisers are best. And even Pinterest is a great example of how to lean into kind of that explorative mindset. When you're just scrolling through a feed, that's a different user experience than when someone is actively going through a platform and typing in exactly what they're looking for. So there are definitely platforms that are going to perform best.
Yeah, there's certainly a strong case for both search and social. And as those are two walled gardens, I think that those are important to engage in because your customers will be there. But more so, I think it's also important to reach them in other environments and to really consider the approach as to how you intend to do that. There's a lot of opportunity for you to control your messaging and sequencing based on certain activities or actions that have already taken place. So there's a strong opportunity to participate in the programmatic space. It just depends on your media mix. We can use all sorts of levers like recency to make sure that audiences have recently engaged with the product page, or we can check and see if they've added their cart. There's no impression that we can deploy without being able to measure its efficiency or use.
Great, thank you. So we'll go ahead and jump over to our Q&A side of things. There's a couple questions here, and then we'll go ahead and go over the poll results. So first question is B2B related. Are there any B2B specific suggestions for targeting, media buying, etc.?
I think I can jump in on this for social. There are certain platforms that lend themselves more to B2B style marketing, and one of them is LinkedIn. Depending on the platform, you're going to have various different ways that you can approach targeting or different audience segments that are even available. But platforms like LinkedIn that are extremely business focused really are, they really explicitly have that type of targeting where other platforms don't necessarily have it. You can target people based on what role they play within a company, what type of vertical they're in. So yeah, I would say there's definitely specific platforms you could go into for more B2B tactics.
Yeah, also within LinkedIn, one of the great tactics to use there is lead gen ads. So if you've got some kind of an asset that you can offer to people, you can exchange that asset for their contact information. If you are having supply chain challenges, which could be unique to certain B2B industries, you can get some data capture, build a nurture stream, and be able to communicate with those people and update them on the supply chain challenges. So yeah, I would second LinkedIn. The other thing I would add is there's also third-party data sets available of companies that are quote unquote surging for specific topics. So there's companies who are monitoring hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of websites, and bringing back those data signals that people are providing based on company URL to say that people who work at Boeing, for example, are searching for content around semiconductors, right? Therefore, they're going to infer that Boeing is in the market for semiconductors right now, and you can access that data at a very granular level to reach those people who are currently in market.
Yeah, that's a great point, Stephen. There's other ways that we can tap in through data providers that also specialize in just B2B data points. We can try and segment those data points in any way, and also work backwards from, an iteration is maybe spreading a wide net of different type of industries, but it really just depends on what your business is in.
Okay, thank you. So the next one, it's more of a point, but okay, so during the time where people are pulling money away from marketing, it seems like an advantageous time to put money into your product service where there could be a lot less competition and create great opportunity. Any thoughts around that?
I would say yes, that definitely makes sense. And we saw that a lot in 2020 when a lot of advertisers were pulling back. I think the one thing you need to consider, particularly with respect to social, is understanding what the environment and the tone of what's going on is. There was a point in 2020 where a lot of huge brands and advertisers pulled off of Facebook because of some social challenges and issues with data or protections that they weren't necessarily taking against hate speech and really other very relevant topics that were happening at the time. So yes, in that instance, there was opportunities for advertisers to jump in. But you just have to understand that some of those opportunities will come with risks, and you want to make sure that you're not alienating your brand or turning people off trying to take advantage of those moments. So just make sure that when you're doing it, that you're looking at the whole picture.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I would just say valuable audiences are valuable to everybody, right? And we're in a biddable marketplace. So right, that ebb and flow of price and demand is definitely there, but as long as the audience is valuable to more than one person, there's going to be competition to get that people. That said, in 2020, we did see decreases in media costs, which led to great efficiencies in the marketplace as people dropped out. What ended up happening actually is a lot of people dropped out, a lot of people came back, and a lot of people came back to performance media channels that weren't there before. right? So you went from this period of being able to have great efficiency to a very crowded marketplace, and the people who kept spending consistently had the benefit of the history with the algorithms, the history of the spend, and being able to use that ad tech to their advantage versus the new people who just jumped in cold. They have to bid up, they have to pay more in order to win more than their fair share of impressions in order to get the algorithms to be smart for them. So again, another case for considering spending throughout.
Great, thank you. So we'll go into our poll results here. So I'll go ahead and just read the questions and the percentage, and feel free to chime in on here. So have you managed, the first poll was, have you managed marketing through a prior economic downturn or recession? Majority of them said no. So 66% said they haven't, and 34% have managed marketing. So here, just a quick thought from one of you guys.
We can help.
Yeah.
Not to be too obvious, but that's what we do. And as we said earlier, every downturn is different, right? Prior success is not an indicator of future performance. We'll throw that disclaimer out there, but this is what we do day in and day out. We're good at reading the data signals in the marketplace, picking the things up that the performance is giving us and being able to optimize and act on it.
Great, thanks, Stephen. Next, the second poll was, have you seen an impact in your marketing budgets or performance related to the current economic situation? Majority said yes, 76% have seen an impact, and 24% have not. So just, is this what you're seeing with the clients, customers that you're working with? Is it?
I'd love to hear from Keith and Phil, but I got to be honest, we're not seeing budgets, knock wood, get cut. The investments that the clients have been making have been pretty consistent. The clients where we have visibility into budgets throughout the year that we got earlier in the year haven't been adjusted based on things changing in the marketplace. So, again, I think when you can prove the performance of the investment, it's easy to make the case to keep it.
Yeah, I'd say the same. Like, there are obviously, it's going to depend on what vertical you're in and what challenges you're facing, especially with supply chain issues. I would say being in performance marketing, it doesn't seem to have quite as much of an impact. Previously when I was in more of a branding environment and working in entertainment, when issues like this came up, we did see decreases in budget because the return wasn't necessarily there, because we weren't able to prove return really for some of those upper funnel strategies. But yeah, I would say not too crazy.
Yeah, and really just to kind of hit this one away, we work with data points that allow us to report back on success. So if you're in business and you drive any type of a digital product or service, there's a good chance that we can help and continue to help, regardless of many of the circumstances that can kind of feel like they affect us at large. But perhaps, if you're, like I said, if you're still in business, we can likely continue to serve you.
Great, thank you. I know we get a couple minutes, so I'll just read through the poll question 3 here, and the answer, or the result. Are you planning to make any adjustments to your budget? Majority of the folks, 46%, said planning to maintain overall budget, but reallocate strategically. And the second is 28%, planning to maintain budget and allocation as is. So some have already done some allocation, others are going to start to strategically do it, which is probably good since we expect things to continually change on the consumer side. So with that, thank you, Stephen, Keith, and Phil for participating, and thank you everyone for attending today's session. We will follow up with the recording. We also have a social media group as well. We'll provide a link in the follow-up email as well. So to end this, while many brands consider potential cuts or reallocation of budget, those that maintain their advertising are likely to benefit from increased share of voice, is what the group has been kind of summed up together here. Once again, if you do have any questions, feel free to connect with us on social media or through email. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.